There are 1.5 million nonprofit organizations operating in our United States. They make up just 5.4% of our GDP, but despite this seemingly small percentage, we rely on these amazing organizations to address some of the biggest threats facing our world. Everything from curing cancer and other diseases, to protecting the environment, to addressing poverty. So the last thing I want to do today is in any way discourage you from supporting these truly amazing organizations. Quite the opposite. However, I am here to tell you that if we truly hope to solve the problems that we face, we need our nonprofits, we need to do something much better. But more on that in a second. First, I want to tell you a little bit more about me. I love solving problems, so I love nonprofits. And nonprofits have largely been my life thus far. I've helped start or worked for several dozen. I've worked for nonprofits locally, nationally, and internationally. And I started my first charity at 16, SOS Ministries. We did everything from entertain truly reluctant senior citizens to putting together random aid packages for folks we somehow deemed in need, all with probably not nearly enough planning. But I got a lot of praise for my work, had my name and picture put in the newspaper, and even received a couple of college scholarships for the effort. There's just one little problem. Did my first nonprofit organization actually contribute to any greater good? That's hard to say, and I can tell you that it definitely did a lot of good for me. And as an awkward and insecure teenager, I desperately craved the attention and the purpose and the accolades that starting that first organization delivered to me. But that's not what a charity is supposed to be about. It wasn't supposed to be about me. A nonprofit exists to provide some public benefit, to contribute to that greater good. And with that first organization, I probably brought a dish to the table that had little nutritional value. Now, my second organization, I started in college. And I definitely had learned a few things by then, and my motivations had improved considerably. But I still made some mistakes. That organization was devoted to inspiring at-risk young people. A noble endeavor for sure. But I failed to look and see if anybody else was already doing that type of work in my community. And sure enough, there was an organization that had been doing much of the same thing for over a decade. Because I failed to coordinate or collaborate with that existing organization, I wasted valuable time and energy solving problems and coming up with plans that they already had and could have shared with me had I just asked. I brought a dish to the table that was already there. Well, hopefully, I have learned from my mistakes because now people hire me to help start or fix nonprofits. And it was a few years ago that a passionate woman, I'll call her Beth, wanted my help to start a 501c3 to feed individuals facing homelessness in her community. A noble endeavor for sure. Except Beth had never run an organization before, let alone a nonprofit. But that didn't stop her. She was determined to quit her job and do just that. Except in this community, there were 4 existing organizations already providing dinners for those in need. And let me ask you this. If I were to ask 4 of you in the audience to collectively come together and bake one cake, but you refused to communicate, you refused to coordinate in any way, you wouldn't know who had already put in that dash of salt, who had added the flour and the sugar, or if that baking pan had been properly waxed, the resulting dessert would likely be a disaster. And sadly, that's exactly what was happening in this particular community. I had to tell Beth that there just was not a need for her effort. But that's not what Beth wanted to hear. So she proceeded forward anyway, and even though she didn't have any experience, she was actually able to raise over $100,000 from friends and family to run her organization. But sadly, because of that same inexperience, her organization closed its doors just 6 months later. and that $100,000 largely went to waste. Now, at another occasion, I watched as a truly wonderful group of people rallied their community to come together and open a shelter for youth facing homelessness. Now, what could be wrong with that? Housing homeless youth. Except that in this community, there were 2 existing shelters already in place, housing homeless youth, neither of which were at capacity. And there was a huge need in that community, as there are in so many, for shelter for homeless adults. I could share example after example after example just like those. I too often see well-meaning organizations bringing the same dish to an already crowded table. In fact, we have seen a 30% increase in the number of nonprofits in this country over just a 10-year span. And that brings me to what we need our nonprofits, what we need to do far better. Brace yourselves, here's the answer. We need to plan better potlucks. Who doesn't love a potluck? We need to plan them better. Because I have seen in communities across this country, potlucks taking place where there are too many appetizers, way too many desserts, not enough attention paid to the main course, and nobody set the table. As a result, we see desserts going to waste, we see people a mess because they don't have silverware or napkins, and folks are leaving the meal sick and malnourished because all they've had to eat is desserts, those wonderful sweets. The same is sadly true too often of our network of nonprofits in this country. I have seen rampant duplication of services and resources, needless reinvention of wheels, while other needs go entirely unmet. We have to plan better potlucks. Somebody needs to tell Uncle Larry that if there's already 4 desserts on the table, we don't need a 5th, bring a veggie tray instead. And now, in my family, planning the perfect potluck largely fell to my mother. She would tell my siblings and I what dishes to bring, or in some cases, what dishes we were forbidden from ever bringing again. She'd ask my father to set the table. She'd tell us when and where to show up. She assured that our family meals were healthy, well-rounded, covering all the major food groups, and efficient. We need the same system for our nonprofits and charities in this country. And there's another thing about potlucks. They're thankfully not supposed to last forever. You show up with your dish, you eat, you socialize, you leave. Mission accomplished. We need more of our nonprofit organizations to follow that same path. You show up with your dish, you serve it, accomplish your mission, and then you leave, which can mean dissolving and passing along your resources to other organizations addressing other needs. We need more nonprofits and charities thinking about, how do I put myself out of business? How do I truly solve this problem? Because we have too many nonprofit organizations in the business of simply existing, not actually succeeding. And we do have some good examples of organizations that truly have modeled how to accomplish your mission and then shut down, freeing up those resources. The Auto Shift Housing Association was started after World War II to house Jews displaced by the war. A few years ago, they announced that they succeeded. They accomplished their mission. They are now in the process of dissolving and passing along their $90 million in assets to other organizations to tackle other needs. Now, let me remind you that I'm in big trouble today if you leave here thinking, I'm never giving to another nonprofit. That's not what I'm trying to do at all. Or that you shouldn't start one of your own. There's more than enough need to go around. But what I'm telling you is that we have to better coordinate and communicate much more strategically. We need to be much more mindful of what dishes we are putting on that table to assure that that potluck is healthy and successful. And I'm tired of seeing too many cooks in the kitchen, and again, too many desserts with not enough focus on the entree, and too many potlucks with no intention of ever ending. We need our nonprofit organizations to ask themselves some tough questions, and especially anyone considering starting one. And those questions are, 1, who else is already doing that work? And is there still a verifiable need? 2, could you partner or collaborate with that existing organization instead of going it on your own? And 3, this is a tough one. Am I the right person or the right entity to truly do this work? And finally, 4, where is your finish line? What is it going to look like when you've accomplished your mission? Now, I ask these questions and more of any new nonprofit. It doesn't always make me very popular, believe it or not. And usually when everyone else is over here liking and praising someone's declaration on Facebook that they're going to quit their job and start a nonprofit, I'm the lone person that's by myself over here cringing and saying, wait, no, stop. I love your passion, but do you have the right skill set? Do you have the qualifications to run such an organization? Because folks, I'm telling you, when it comes to starting a public not-for-profit organization that is intended to provide public benefit and address real issues that impact all of us, we have to require more than just good intentions. We have to assure that that organization is truly helping, because the needs are just piling up and our resources are finite. Now, I serve as the executive director of an organization that provides one solution to our potluck problem. Priorities Spokane serves Spokane County, Washington, by identifying priorities, needs, and then working to address them. And when we are looking at what need we're going to tackle next, we first look for solid evidence that that need exists. Then we look for best practices that we can borrow so that we don't reinvent wheels, we don't waste resources trying to rediscover what's already out there. And we sit down with organizations that are already working in that field, because the last thing we want to do is duplicate what's already been done. We give ourselves a timeline, typically 3 to 5 years, so that we don't go on forever. We want to make sure that we're highly motivated to get the job done. And then we mark the finish line so that when we cross it, we celebrate, and then we move on to the next need and the next priority. And the proof that this potluck works is in the pudding, so to speak. Because in 2006, just under 60% of Spokane students were graduating from high school. But because our community came together and used that same model I just shared with you, they coordinated. They all agreed to follow the same game plan. They were able to raise those graduation rates from under 60% to over 80% in just 5 years' time. So potlucks work. Coordination works. And that model of working together, collective impact, earned Spokane County the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Culture of Health Prize. And now we have moved on to addressing other needs and other priorities. So what can you do to assure that organizations in your communities are working together so that we can truly solve the problems that we face? First and foremost, ask your wonderful organizations that are too often overworked and underpaid what you can do to help. How you can help support that coordination and collaboration process. And this is the big idea that we absolutely need to make happen in this country, and that's that we need our government to ask those same tough questions I mentioned earlier of every organization applying for tax-exempt status. Who is already doing the work? Where is the evidence of the need? Could you partner with an existing organization instead? Where is your finish line? And we need our state governments to maintain databases of organizations that are searchable by the needs they're working to meet, because organizations cannot coordinate or collaborate if they don't know one another exist. Push your nonprofits and charities, encourage them to coordinate and collaborate not separate, and donate your dollars to those who do. Because the only way we're going to get ahead of the many issues that we face is through strategic coordination, by coming together to assure that we're collaborating and that everyone gets fed at a well-planned potluck. Thank you.